Hi everyone, I'm Kaitlin, and today I'm going to be talking about the applied feminist theory in the workforce. So my major claim basically is that women in today's workforce still need to exercise feminist theory to pursue workplace and job equality, even though all citizens should theoretically have equal civic opportunities. So I'm going to do that firstly by defining feminist theory, and then my secondary claims are going to go into how the glass ceiling is still in effect and how it negatively affects certain groups, in this case women, and then how women in the workforce have a very hard choice of either having to bear children or not, which also negatively affects their career paths. I don't know why I just got dry mouth all of a sudden, but we're going to work through it. So in case your definition of feminist theory is a little rusty, basically it aims to understand the nature of gender inequality, and through that it examines women's and men's social roles, experiences, interests, chores, and then also feminist politics and a variety of fields within that. So basically I'm going to focus on analyzing the gender inequality in the workforce, and through that the discrimination, objectification, and oppression that kind of flows through that. So back to the glass ceiling. Basically that's the acknowledged barrier to the advancement of anyone in a profession, specifically women in this case, but does not exclude minorities. So basically, although we live in a nation that has somewhat cracked through that glass, so to say, basically a barrier still remains. So Sheryl Sandberg, who is in my opinion a personal hero, she's an executive at Facebook and also the author of the book Lean In, which talks about women in the workforce. And basically her book studied how C-suite executives and their demographics correlate to some really disheartening facts. So women are not making it to the top of their field in any profession worldwide. So basically, some stats are 190 heads of state, 9 are women. Of all the people in parliament in the world, 13 are women. And in the corporate sector, so women at the top, C-suite position, board seat, those types of things, top out at around 15 or 16%. In a nonprofit world, which statistically people think that it is a women-dominated field, is not. It tops out at about 20%. So Sheryl basically goes into talking about how that fact alone creates the issue of women having to face harder choices between professional success and personal fulfillment, also known, as childbearing. So basically, in her book, she studies the U.S. and how married senior executives, 2/3 of them have children, whereas only 1/3 of married female executives have children. So you can see the disparity there. Basically, these patriarchal workplaces don't facilitate gender equality, which makes it difficult for women to achieve greater workforce success, which also means we need to apply this feminist theory even more so. There's another study that I'm going to talk about, which involves Heidi Rosen, and basically she was a case study that was developed at the Harvard School of Business, and she is a woman who works in the Silicon Valley, and she basically became a really successful venture capitalist. So a professor at Columbia University took her individual case study, and basically he had 2 groups, right? And one group he gave this case study as Heidi, and the other one he changed the name to Howard. So both groups basically read through this case study, and at the end they were asked to evaluate which one would be a better executive. And outstandingly, people chose Howard because he seemed to be a good boss and leader and executive, showcasing stereotypical masculine traits like assertiveness and stuff like that. Whereas everyone that viewed Heidi's, not everyone, but a majority of people that viewed Heidi's profile didn't agree with her being the best choice. So basically, the research from this study showed that success and likability are positively correlated with men, but negatively correlated with women. So it's kind of just this perpetuated stereotype in the workforce at the senior executive level. My second part of this would be that for women in the workforce, the choice to bear children negatively affects their careers. So promotion and possibility of growth within a company for a woman decreases significantly once they decide to have a child. And I'm not even talking about them being pregnant. It's just the moment they start to think about conceiving a child, it's their timeline starts. So that's typically 9 months to carry a child, and then 3 to 6 months afterwards to care for and heal as a mother. Basically, starting families is really difficult and can put a strain on whether or not they're going to have a job when they go back, and also whether or not they can, their mobility upward within the company that they work for. So that's another issue. Basically, what happens is once a woman in the workforce has a job, or has a child at her job, she goes into the second shift. And basically what that is that their first shift being their place of work and their second shift being caretaker at home. So this drastically impacts like their productivity as a person in general. Not that statistically men or fathers don't help out with the caretaking of their children, but for the most part, that is the case. So in conclusion, women in today's workforce still need to exercise feminist theory within the workplace to create job equality, and through that the glass ceiling is still in place, which negatively affects it, and that having children can also negatively affect that. Thank you.
All right, the proposition at the beginning of the speech sounded much more complicated than what you have on your outline here, so I think you're going to have to listen back to it to see what some of my issues with it are, because it seemed like it had dependent clauses and justifications built into it. Ultimately, the simple part is the part that you want to stick with, and that there's still a need to exercise feminist theory in the workplace. That's the ultimate propositional statement. Everything else is secondary material that should be in your justifications, not in the proposition. There's a long, brief I should say long brief, that sounds complicated, contradictory. There's a involved definition of feminism that is probably okay and necessary to talk about, but I think you might want to talk a little bit more about the barriers that you see in place that feminism has not been able to address. The glass ceiling, you've got some statistical data on this to illustrate the point with the heads of state that you mentioned and the percentages in the different job occupations that you're talking about. I think that illustrates your point to some degree there. How feminist theory explains what that is and what barriers exist, that I think is a little less clear. It's the notion that this is a result of a patriarchal society or intentional actions, I think is a little problematic. And in fact, it seems to contradict the point that you make later on, which suggests that there's a true track process that's a result of this decision to have children. That's a part of the process. How that's an issue in relationship to the feminist theory is not quite explained. It sounds to me like it's just like any issue that people come up against. There is a complication in life, where you want to live, how you want to live your life, what choices you make. The argument seems to be that you shouldn't have to make these kinds of choices. I'm not sure that that's what the theory that you're talking about is subscribing to, but maybe that the consequence of those choices are imposed rather than voluntary. That, I think, is maybe where the argument probably needs to be developed a little bit more. You have a tendency to cite sources without necessarily quoting them directly. I got the feeling that I was getting kind of a paraphrase of some of the theory from your hero, the Facebook executive, and then there was another one that you quoted later on. There's also this example of the research that was done that where they were evaluating two candidates, and it's hypothetical Heidi and Harold, I guess it was, or Howard, in those particular situations and how they were evaluated. It's interesting that the inference that you draw from it is that there's some bias built in here. I would imagine that the respondent could say, yeah, the bias appears to be amongst Harvard-educated people because they're the ones in the study. They're the ones who are biased. I'm not sure that it demonstrates that a bias exists outside of that context. That's just one of those things that's going to be an issue with the kind of research that's being presented. Although you said you had a good preview at the beginning of the speech, I didn't think that it was as clearly structured in the body of the speech. That to me was really problematic because I got lots of explanations and background information and not really a lot of claims on those particular points. I got the feeling that I was being sort of given an explanation, a lecture instead of an argument, and I think I needed more of the argument that goes along with those points. I need to know what the claims are that you're asking me to leave, because I can accept a lot of the information that you presented. I think that there's good proof on some of the data that you're presenting. My question is, what inference am I supposed to draw from that? And I didn't think that that was as clear as it needed to be. A presentation thing, I hope it doesn't sound sexist, but I think you need to project your voice a little bit more. I had a difficult time hearing at the beginning of the speech. I think you got a little bit better during the presentation. And I have the problem here rushing with time, I think you're doing a little bit of rushing too. So it's just one of those things. That's a time-sensitive issue. All right, thank you.